the most havoc. One is I think that they probably increase your appetite for sugar anyway. So if you're consuming them in an effort to avoid sugar, you have to be just mindful of the fact that, am I robbing Peter to pay Paul? If you really want to eliminate sugar as one of your dietary strategies, you might just be better off reducing sweet things altogether. And what you'll discover, because I've done this myself. I've had periods in my life where I've been, very dogmatic about restricting sugar. I'm not that dogmatic about it these days, right? But when I have been, one of the things I noticed was how unbelievably sweet things are that I used to not think were that sweet, like berries. Raspberries aren't generally thought of as the sweetest thing in the world. But when you completely eliminate artificial sweeteners and regular sweeteners, after a few months, berries become insanely sweet. 85% chocolate becomes mind-bogglingly sweet, as opposed to what most people would think of it as kind of bitter. There was a recent study published that looked at one particular sweetener, erythritol, and it was a pretty poorly done study. But it asked some interesting questions, right? Which is, is a metabolite of this potentially atherogenic?
What's atherogenic?
Would it lead to or cause atherosclerosis?
What's that?
Cardiovascular disease, sort of the inflammatory disease of the coronary arteries and other arteries. Again, I think the data are pretty underwhelming that artificial sweeteners are harmful, but I also think there's probably a class of differences between them. So my personal favorite of all of them is something called allulose. Allulose it's basically natural. It is an enantiomer of fructose, meaning it's a molecule that's almost identical to fructose with one very minor structural change. What's unique about it is it has, in my opinion, the best taste. Because the thing I don't like about artificial sweeteners is I just don't like the taste. I actually like the taste of sugar. I don't like the taste of, saccharin. I don't really like the taste of aspartame. I certainly don't like the taste of stevia. I mean, that to me makes me want to vomit. But allulose has the same taste, the same mouthfeel as sugar, and the only drawback is it's only 70% as sweet, which is not a real drawback because you could always dose it up if you want. It also has the added benefit of it appears to actually reduce blood glucose a little bit. It appears to have an effect where it pulls glucose into the kidney and basically increases the filtration, glomerular filtration of glucose. So it slightly lowers glucose, not as potently as something called an SGLT2 inhibitor, which is a class of drug that does that. But it's very interesting nonetheless. So, I guess if I were thinking about how I would consume it, I would probably consume more allulose than other things. But unfortunately, it's still not that prevalent in foods. You have to just buy the allulose itself. So if I'm making something, I'll use allulose in it.
What I like about this framing is it gets to one of the reasons why doing a randomized control trial for diet stuff is so hard. Because how are you going to be able to control for the psychological training that having a sweet thing, even if it is a 0-calorie sweet thing, even if it's a 0-calorie sweet thing with no downstream risks to your body unless you take it at insane dosages, how are you going to be able to control for what that does psychologically to people's expectations of the sweetness of their foods, of the frequency of having sweet things throughout their diet? I think that's a really nice little microcosm there.